Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of velvet slippers, jasmine-scented courtyards, and bubbling pots of bitter delight. You race standing under a violet twilight sky in 16th century Constantinople modern day. Istanbul, where lanterns glow like sleepy fireflies and the scent of roasting beans curls through the alleys like a whispered invitation. That's right, coffee has just arrived in the Ottoman Empire. You're not sipping your vanilla soy latte just yet, though. This is the early stage Yemenis traders unloading rough canvas sacks from dhows along the Red Sea, their cargo rich with promise and caffeine. These aren't beans for breakfast. These are magic seeds that monks once brewed to stay up chanting all night. They're bitter, earthy, potent, and utterly foreign to the Ottoman palate. You probably won't survive this, you see. The first time you drink this stuff, it hits you like a caravan stampede. Your heart skips, your eyelids pop open like window shutters, and you start contemplating your entire life choices while staring at a mosaic tile floor. And yet, the pull is undeniable. From port cities like Mocha and Aden, coffee journeys into the veins of the empire, carried by traders, mystics, and herbalists who claim it sharpens the mind and warms the soul. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I am curious who is dozing off where in the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail behind a group of scholars crossing the Bosphorus ferry. They're arguing, loudly and with flailing arms, about whether coffee increases humoral imbalance because, of course, in Ottoman medicine, every drinkable substance is either hot, cold, dry, or moist. Coffee, possibly all four at once. You stay quiet. You just want to taste the stuff. A local apothecary finally sells you some dark powder wrapped in muslin and you cradle it like a secret. At home, you boil it 3 times in a copper saisie over low coals, adding a pinch of cardamom. The first sip is all grit. The second, something close to smoky silk. The third makes you feel like you could rewrite the Quran in song. This is the world coffee is about to conquer an empire straddling Europe and Asia. Home to bureaucrats who rise before dawn and poets who never sleep. You can see why they take to this dark little miracle. It promises clarity, energy, and maybe, just maybe, a glimpse of the divine. Soon, pilgrims begin bringing beans north from Mecca. Traders add cinnamon and cloves. Local healers prescribe it for everything from melancholy to constipation. By 1550, coffee isn't just here, it's fashionable. You even hear a rumor that a certain court official drinks for cups before composing imperial edicts. No wonder they're so aggressive. But not everyone approves. You notice the older generation squinting suspiciously at your cup. One mumbles that it's in Arabian Vice. Another mutters that it smells like scorched shoes. Still, the trend is spreading faster than anyone can stop it. You follow a street musician through a narrow bazaar, past spice stalls and silk drapes, into a makeshift tent where coffee is being brewed for free. A Sufi mystic in white robes murmurs prayers while grinding the beans by hand. It wakes the soul, he tells you, but it must be sipped with patience. You sip. You feel your pulse quicken. A thought forms in your mind, half memory, half mirage, and you realize this isn't just a drink. It's a ritual, a new kind of communion. Some say this was when the empire started to change, not through war or rebellion, but through a humble little cup. Coffee doesn't demand conquest. It demands conversation. And the Ottomans, for all their military prowess, are secretly obsessed with ideas. You wander back through the city, ears buzzing with debate, nose full of smoke and spices. Thoughts racing. Already, neighborhood coffee houses are popping up. You'll see one in the next section. But for now, you lie back in your rooftop room, listening to the hum of voices and the soft clink of cups far below. The empire doesn't know it yet, but a revolution is percolating. You wake to the smell of roasted beans drifting on the wind, curling through the shutters like a sly invitation. Down below, the narrow street buzzes with morning voices, tin cups clinking, sandals flapping on stone. It's early, but the city is already alert thanks, in no small part, to the rise of something revolutionary, the coffee house. The first time you push open the heavy wooden door of a cave, you're not sure what to expect. Maybe solemn monks chanting, maybe apothecaries brewing potions in bubbling pots. What you find is cozier, a low-lit room filled with smoky air, soft carpets, and a dozen men sprawled on cushions, all sipping from tiny porcelain cups. Some are playing chess, their moves slow and deliberate, pieces worn smooth by decades of contemplation. Others read aloud from thick, thumbed manuscripts. One man is just staring at a fig. You shuffle in awkwardly, find a cushion in the corner, and clutch your cup like it's a magic talisman. The coffee is thick and muddy, more like a potion than a drink. But you sip, you listen, and soon, you begin to understand the rhythm of this place. Here, time moves differently. There's no rush, no barked orders. Conversations drift lazily across the room. Debates about poetry, whispers of palace intrigue, arguments about whether cats have souls. The proprietor, a man named Hazen with a beard like a garden hedge, moves silently between patrons, refilling cups and passing around dishes of sticky dates and pistachios. You overhear one man reciting a new ghazal, comparing his lover's eyelids to ostrich feathers. Another retells a dream involving a flying camel and a talking stove. No one blinks. This is what the cave offers. Not just caffeine, but communion. Not just stimulation, but a sanctuary of thought. And it's not just scholars here. Across the room, a group of janissaries, those elite imperial soldiers, lounges against the wall, their boots off, sipping with surprising delicacy. One is sketching an elaborate doodle of a fish playing a tambourine. These men may serve the Sultan, but here, they're just guys with opinions about walnut baklava. Historians still argue whether these early coffee houses were truly radical spaces, or just cozy hangouts. What's clear is that something was changing. The Ottoman world, once centered around the mosque and the palace, now had a third space, a secular salon where ideas flow like dark syrup, and rank didn't matter as much as wit. You return again and again. There's something soothing about the predictability of it, the hiss of the brazier, the crackle of kindling, the thick smell of coffee and tobacco. On rainy days, musicians arrive out, players and flutists who make the entire room sway like kelp in a tide. On feast days, someone always brings too many sweets and insists everyone take at least 3. Occasionally, you glance at the door, half expecting a raid. Not because anything illegal is happening, but because the air feels a little too free, a little too open. There's a tension now. You can feel it in the way Hazen looks over his shoulder when strangers enter. In the sudden hush when someone mentions the Grand Vizier. You hear rumors that the palace doesn't like these places. Too many opinions, too much laughter. Still, for now, you keep coming. You even make friends. There's Howell, who claims to be descended from a pirate. Nemant, a retired palace cook who critiques every cup of coffee like it's a soup competition. And Selim, a barber who once trimmed the beard of a Venetian ambassador and has not stopped talking about it since. One evening, Nemant leans in and whispers, "They say the Sultan's brother drinks coffee at night, alone. Like it's a secret." He winks. Everyone's addicted, and it's not just a rumor. Across the empire, coffee houses bloom like spring crocuses. In Aleppo, in Cairo, in Damascus, every city has its own style, its own flavor. Some add saffron or rose water. Others play chess tournaments or host philosophical salons. You wonder how long it can last. One night, as you walk home along the moonlit canal, your cup still warm in your hand, you hear distant boots on cobblestones. Not in a hurry, just present. A reminder that while the coffee house may feel like a dream, the empire is very real, and it does not sleep easily. For now, though, you're safe in the strange, sleepy haven. Tomorrow, the world may shift, but tonight, there's warmth in your belly, words in your head, and the promise of another quiet morning cup. The morning air is cool and heavy with the scent of roasting beans. As you wander back to your favorite corner of the Cave, the usual crew is there, Howells explaining how his pirate grandfather once fought off an entire Portuguese galleon using only stale bread. Nimit is criticizing someone's cinnamon ratio, and Selim is reenacting the time he almost shaved the Grand Vizier's ear off. It's the same comforting absurdity, but today, something's different. There's a nervous energy in the room, more whispers, fewer jokes. You catch the word Janissaries more than once, not in admiration, but in apprehension. You glance toward the door, and then they walk in. 3 Janissaries, sharp-eyed and silent, their boots still dusty from the parade ground. They don't sit, they scan the room. One of them mutters something under his breath and eyes the chessboard in the corner, like it is plotting against the Empire. Another picks up a coffee cup, sniffs it, and sets it down without drinking. You freeze mid-sip, so does everyone else. But then, the third soldier, tall, older, with the kind of mustache that commands authority and accidentally dips into soup, pulls up a cushion and says, "Make it strong." The tension breaks like a snap violin string. Hazen hustles over with a sazvi, pouring carefully, reverently. The Janissary sips, exhales, and nods once. "Good," he says. "Not as good as in Damascus, but close." Laughter spreads across the room like rising steam. Cups clink. Nimit offers the soldiers his homemade semolina cakes, and within minutes they raid deep in a game of backgammon while Howell insists. They listen to his latest theory about sea monsters in the Bosphorus. For now, the soldiers are not enforcers, they're patrons. You breathe easier, even joke a little about the state of their boots. But underneath it all, the feeling lingers. The Empire's elite are taking notice, and coffee is no longer just a drink. Over the following days, you notice more uniforms in the Cave. Some sit, some just glare, but everyone seems to want in on the experience. Coffee has become more than a beverage, it's a cultural force, a unifying obsession, and sometimes a divisive one. Because not all Janissaries are here to play chess. You overhear the tailors whispering about a recent raid in Sktar. Cups smashed, pipes confiscated, and one poor fellow publicly humiliated for brewing coffee with nutmeg, apparently a suspiciously decadent choice. In Bursa, word spreads that a coffee house was shut down for hosting satirical poetry nights. The rhyme scheme, they say, was dangerously clever. Historians still argue whether these growing tensions were just elite paranoia or signs of deeper unrest. After all, the Ottoman Empire is vast and complex, an endless tapestry of peoples, provinces, and politics. And while the court may see coffee houses as innocent distractions, some officials whisper that they're breeding grounds for dissent. After all, what else do you do once you're caffeinated and slightly bitter? You talk, you plot, you write rude couplets about your boss. Back in your neighborhood Cave, Selim has taken to composing coffee odes. He recites them dramatically, always ending with something like, "O being most dark and subtle, thou stealer of dreams and bow." Everyone claps, except the stern man near the window who never drinks and always writes things down. It is becoming clear. Coffee isn't tea just fueling your brain, it is lighting up the Empire's collective imagination. Merchants swapping varieties like rare spices. Students memorize elaborate brewing rituals. Sufi mystics debate whether God prefers Robusta or Arabica. And yes, even the Janissaries seem to sip with more fervor than fear. You learn that certain regiments have their own secret blends. One adds a dash of dried orange peel. Another uses goat milk, though no one is sure why. There is even a rumor that an elite cavalry unit drinks coffee mixed with powdered pearl before battle, allegedly for shimmering focus. But while all this brewing and bonding continues, you can feel it like the low hum of a storm on the horizon. The more the Cave becomes a place of expression, the more dangerous it feels to express anything too openly. Still, you return each day. Each sip grounds you. Each laugh softens the edges. You cherish the odd conversations and the gentle absurdities. Like the blind out player who insists he once served coffee to a jinn, or the fortune teller who reads the coffee grounds left in your cup and predicts you'll live to be 112, but forget where you put your slippers every single day. It's home now. This strange little universe of porcelain cups, sandalwood smoke, an idea spoken softly between sips. But deep within the palace, someone is stirring. Someone not amused by satire or cardamom. Someone whose mood is about to reshape everything you thought you understood about warm beverages. You won't see it coming, but in the next few weeks, the entire tone of the empire is going to change from gently caffeinated to brutally alert. Better refill your cup while you can. Tonight, you wander through a quieter alley, following the scent of coffee not to your usual cafe, but to a hidden courtyard. Beyond the spice bazaar, you've heard whispers about the gatherings, the singing, the spinning, and indeed, behind a half-closed gate carved with curling vines, there's a flickering light and a low, rhythmic hum. You slip inside. The scent of cardamom hits you first sharp and perfumed. Then the sound, a slow, rising chant that curls up through your bones like smoke. Before you, a ring of Sufi dervishes moves in slow unison, arms raised, robes flowing like ripples on dark water. Around them, candles flicker in niches, casting shadows that dance to an invisible rhythm. And in the center of it all, coffee. A brass tray sits low to the ground, steam curling from a single, well-worn sazvi. A robed man with a trimmed white beard ladles out the thick brew into tiny ceramic bowls. No sugar, no milk, just the dark stuff, sacred, undiluted. You sit, you're offered a cup. You drink the bitterness. Surprises you not aggressive, just focused, like a silent teacher telling you to listen. Around you, the chant grows louder, the spinning intensifies, and the room begins to feel suspended, as though gravity itself is humming along. Coffee here isn't a pastime, it's a portal. The dervishes, members of mystical Islamic brotherhoods, use coffee the way monks once used incense, to keep the mind alert during long nights of meditation and prayer. Historians still argue whether this sacred use predates or follows the secular coffee house trend. But there is no denying that, here, caffeine is spiritual technology. You watch as one dervish, younger than the rest, breaks into a wider spiral. His footwork is precise, his balance uncanny. He's clearly been doing this since before he could read. Around him, others whirl with eyes half closed, murmuring the 99 names of God under their breath. It's hypnotic. You don't move. You barely blink. A man beside you, silent until now, leans in and says, "It helps us remember without sleeping, to stay awake in more ways than one." He smiles, and you realize that coffee here isn't about socializing or rebellion. It's about devotion. The Sufis sip to dissolve the self, to stay alert enough to forget who they are. Later, after the final turn, when the chanting fades and the coals begin to die down, you join the group in quiet reflection. No one speaks much. There's just the soft sound of cups being placed gently on stone. One dervish begins slowly wiping each ceramic cup with a cloth embroidered with verses from Rumi. Another sprinkles rose water on the floor, an offering, or maybe just habit. Someone begins humming a lullaby in Persian, and the entire courtyard seems to sway. You leave with your head buzzing, not from the caffeine, but from the stillness it somehow left behind. You feel stretched thin and tall, like the flame of a candle flickering but unbroken. In the following days, you notice traces of this mystical tradition everywhere. A barber down the road claims he learned to brew coffee from a dervish in Kenya. A butcher in Balat blesses each batch of beans before grinding them. You even catch Hazen at the Kavhain muttering quiet prayers over his sazvi when he thinks no one is watching. You begin to wonder whether the line between sacred and secular is as clear as the officials think. Because here, in this empire of domes and divans, coffee doesn't just keep you awake, it keeps the culture awake. And that, perhaps, is what makes it dangerous. A drink that sharpens the senses, amplifies the voice, and keeps people from sleeping soundly. That's not just a beverage. That's a movement. You sit at your usual cushion again. Howell's retelling his pirate story. But now it ends with a coffee trading subplot. Nimitz insists that Sufi coffee tastes better because it's blessed. Selim has composed a love poem to his Sazvi, which rhymes, oddly enough, with eczema. And somewhere, deep inside Topkapi Palace, someone is reviewing a report. A detailed list of coffee houses, patrons, discussions, a warning, a frown, a plan. But you don't know that yet. You're just watching your coffee swirl in its cup, the ground settling like tiny constellations. Maybe there's a pattern. Maybe not. You sip, you listen, and all around you, the city stays just a little more awake. You hear the news before sunrise. Someone runs past your window muttering, "He's done it. The Sultan's lost his mind." You roll out of bed, still half dreaming, and rush into the street where whispers cling like dew to the morning air. It's not a raid or an earthquake or a new tax on apricots. No, it's something far worse. Sultan Murad for his banned coffee. You blink. The Sultan, the tall one with a hawk-like nose and a passion for poetry. Yes, that Murad. Except lately, he hasn't been writing much poetry. Word is, he wakes angry, sleeps angrier, and sees treason in his own bathwater. He's still young, barely into his 20s, but he rules like a storm cloud with a throne. And now he's declared war on beans. You trudge to the Kav Hain in disbelief. The door is shut, the windows are dark. Hazen stands out front, arms crossed, muttering things you're not supposed to say about emperors unless you enjoy losing your head or your ability to chew inside. The savas have been hidden. The cushions are rolled. Even the backgammon board is upside down. Like a flip beetle, Nimitz appears briefly, holding a jar of cardamom like it's a lost relic, and whispers, "We're cursed." Murad's decree is no joke, not a polite memo or a symbolic gesture. It's a flat-out prohibition, announced by town criers and enforced by men with swords. No more roasting beans. No more Kav Hains. No more yawning through dawn sermons with a piping hot demi-tasse in your hand. You'd think people might rebel. But here's the thing, Murad doesn't just ban coffee. He bans alcohol, tobacco, even listening to certain types of music. He strolls the streets in disguise at night, testing taverns and scowling at late-night laughter. He is, essentially, an empire's worst roommate, cranky, controlling, and completely intolerant of fun. Historians still argue whether Murad's crackdown was about moral reform, imperial control, or a personal vendetta against joy itself. Some say he feared the coffee house's influence, its whispering poets, its restless janissaries, its laughter that wasn't directed at him. Others think he just hated not being the most awake person in the room. What's clear is this: he sees coffee as a threat, and that makes your little cup of comfort a criminal act. You try to laugh it off. What's next? Selim quips. A ban on raisins, but the mood is tense. Hazen has already heard of 3 Kav Hain owners being arrested. One had his brazier dumped into the Bosphorus. Another had to bribe an official with a gold ring and a really convincing sob story. Even Howell is shaken. "I can't go back to tea," he mutters. It's like drinking hot disappointment. You try to resist. You brew quietly at home. You use spices to mask the smell. You drink from a cracked sugar bowl just in case someone peeks through the shutters. But it's not the same. It's not just about the drink, it's about the ritual, the people, the room full of lazy thinkers and sleepy jokes. Without that, the city feels dry, dusty, less curious, and it's not just the coffee houses. Music is quieter in the streets. The shadow puppet shows vanish. Even the tulip sellers look glum. The empire isn't just sober, it's somber. Murad stalks the streets in disguise, they say, dressed as a commoner. If he catches you with a cup, the punishment varies from beatings to exile to, in extreme cases, execution. He once reportedly decapitated a man for drinking wine during Ramadan. People whisper that he doesn't sleep, that he patrols at night like a caffeinated specter of doom. One night, you hear the knock. Not a loud bang, just 3 sharp taps on the back door. You freeze, cup halfway to your lips. Is it the Sultan, a spy, a neighbor needing cardamom? It's Hazen. He holds up a small pouch like a magician revealing a rabbit. Yemeni, he says, finest roast. Let's make it count. You light a candle. You grind the beans. You brew like your ancestors are watching. The first sip is electric. It tastes like risk and rebellion, like something you're not supposed to have, and therefore need more than ever. You drink in silence, listening to the wind through the alley, wondering if Murad himself might be crouched behind a chimney, sniffing for espresso. Later, as you walk Hazen out, you spot a pair of boots in the shadows, not moving, just watching. You say nothing. You bow slightly, and you close the door very slowly. Sleep does not come easily that night. It's a new world now, one where waking up comes with consequences, one where the softest pleasures are suspect, one where you never quite know who is watching or whether they'll let you finish your cup before they strike. It starts to feel like you're living in a spy novel written by a barista. You step carefully now, eyes flicking to corners, nostrils trained to catch even the faintest whiff of roasted beans on the breeze. Your friends are quieter. Conversations are coded. Even the way you ask for coffee has changed. Shall we share a cup of the reminder? I believe the pot of memory is ready. Fancy a warm bit of clarity. Euphemisms bloom like spring flowers in this gray and anxious city. And you've become an expert in the art of sipping without slurping. Everyone knows the stakes. Murad IV's crackdown is no empty threat. By now, you've heard the stories, some so absurd they must be true. A bookseller caught grinding beans under the floorboards of his shop. Banished to the edge of Anatolia. A palace guard caught with mocha on his breath. Shaved bald and reassigned to camel duty. One man was allegedly arrested for merely smelling like coffee. He tried to protest that he'd simply walked too closely behind someone carrying a roast. The judge wasn't amused. And worst of all, people start to disappear. Selim stops coming around. No word, no warning. Just gone. You ask about him at the hammam, at the cloth market, even his mother's spice stall. No one knows. Or maybe they do. But no one says. You catch a merchant looking over his shoulder before muttering, he talked too much, and brewed boldly. That night, you drink in silence, your cup trembling ever so slightly. You light a single candle and sit by the window, watching the street for signs of janissaries in disguise. You think you see one tall, still, pretending to fix a lantern, but maybe it's just a neighbor with good posture and bad timing. You're not paranoid. You're prepared. Hazen, now running an illicit coffee house behind his cousin's carpet stall, has developed elaborate countermeasures. One candle in the window. All clear. 2 candles. Lay low. 3. Hide the beans and feign illness. On Mondays, he plays out music loudly to mask grinding noises. On Fridays, he swears he only serves bitter soup. Historians still debate how widespread these underground brewers became. Was it an organized resistance or just a scattered patchwork of sleepy rebels? Some accounts say entire neighborhoods operated on coded bean trade. Others claim the whole thing is romantic myth, dramatized by later generations of nostalgic caffeine addicts. But you know the truth. It was real. And it was steamy. Even Howell reappears one afternoon, looking ragged but defiant. I've been roasting with pine needles. He whispers, tastes like despair. But I'm still standing. You embrace him, Nimit, still somehow baking, passes around illicit coffee-flavored pastries. Everyone eats like it's a sacrament. But there is still danger. One evening, you spot a janissary peeking through the curtain of a silk shop across the street. He's not looking at fabrics. He's watching. You lower your cup, pretend it's broth, nod respectfully, walk away. From then on, your sips are shorter, your visits more spaced out. You start boiling water twice to confuse the scent. You even experiment with disguises shawls, fake coughs, once even a wooden leg though that just made you walk in circles and spill half the coffee. Still, you persist. Because there's something deeply human about this act, this refusal to let go of comfort, of connection, of that simple daily ritual that makes you feel alive. The ban is absurd, but it's also frightening, and in a way, it has transformed your daily brew into a kind of small, private act of defiance. You think of Murad IV again. Some say he once drank coffee himself before the bans. Others claim he hated the idea of men sitting around laughing. While he wrestled with seditious viziers and regional revolts, he was surrounded by whispers of poisoners, conspirators, poets with sharp pens. Maybe the ban wasn't about the drink at all. Maybe it was about control, and coffee, and all its steamy, jittery stubbornness, is just to free. You remember something Selim used to say, "They can take our beans, but they'll never take our buzz." It sounded ridiculous at the time. Now, it feels like prophecy. In the end, you keep sipping, carefully, quietly, but without apology. Because in this world of silence and surveillance, where pleasure is policed and joy is rationed, your tiny porcelain cup is more than just a vessel. It's a symbol, a reminder that beneath the rules and robes and regulations, there's still a city of people who just want to wake up, talk nonsense, and feel the warmth of something real in their hands. You raise your cup in a quiet toast to coffee, to stubbornness, to staying awake in the empire of fear. You've developed a new habit. Whenever you hear footsteps in the alley outside your window fast, soft, not quite sneaky, you reach for your little jar of ashes, not for some arcane ritual, no, just to sprinkle into your brazier in case the coffee police burst in and ask what the delicious scent might be, though. This just warming last night's lentils, you'd say, eyes wide, smile innocent. It's ridiculous. It's exhausting. It's your new normal. Because now, the spies have arrived. You've always known the empire employed informants, but lately, the rumor is that Sultan Murad IV has expanded the program, creating an entire underclass of secret coffee sniffers. They roam the alleys, slip into bathhouses, even crouch under window sills just to catch the faint hiss of savas bubbling over coals. They're called Kuloglan, sons of slaves, and their job is simple: eavesdrop, report, and keep the empire firmly decaffeinated. You first spot one outside the bakery, pretending to adjust his sandal while clearly eyeing the cinnamon jar with unusual suspicion. Later, at the silk stall, another man accidentally drops his turban and sniffs the air like a bloodhound. You pass him and murmur, "I'm drinking broth." He doesn't reply. You become fluent in deception. Your coffee now lies inside an empty olive jar labeled for pickling. Your sesame is hidden behind a wall tile that you loosened with a spoon. You've even taught your neighbor's parrot to shriek, "Sleep is virtue," whenever someone knocks too loudly. And you're not alone. Hazen's underground cafe now operates on a rotating schedule, changing locations every 2 days. You follow the clues: a red thread tied to a fig tree, a chalk mark on a lamppost, a coded phrase whispered through a backlog of vendors. Is the moon waxing? No, it's sipping. You arrive at tonight as venue a root cellar beneath a dye shop and descend the crooked stairs into a space that smells of walnuts, ink, and slightly burnt hope. The room is packed, quiet, but buzzing. People lean in to speak. Candles are kept low. Every cup is half shielded behind someone's sleeve. You recognize most of the faces. There's Hallow with his leather satchel full of improbable rumors. Nimit with her new almond paste sweet shape, unsubtly, like Savas, even a man from the mosque, who once lectured against caffeine, now sipping with the gilded delight of a child caught raiding honey. Tonight's brew is spiced with mastic. It tastes like ancient secrets and mild regret. A man at the corner begins reciting poetry softly, barely audible over the bubbling pot. Bitter bean, thou vessel of truths, who whispers gently in bitter booths. You smile, you sip, you listen. But even down here, even among friends, there's tension. Every creak of the floorboards above makes heads turn. Every knock on a pipe silences the room. And when someone sneezes too loudly, a woman drops her cup and curses in 3 languages. Historians still debate the effectiveness of Murad's spy network. Some say it was a bloated, paranoid mess. Others argue it genuinely kept the empire alert and fearful. But everyone agrees it was unusually invested in beverage control. One document even details a sting operation involving fake coffee houses and strategically planted pastries. You once hear of a man arrested for running a bean-whispering service. His crime? Sitting in a public square and describing in great detail what a cup of coffee might taste like. The prosecution argued that this was incitement. The judge sentenced him to a week scrubbing palace tiles with lemon. You begin writing your thoughts in code now. You keep a journal in which coffee is ink, save us are crickets, and caffeine is simply clarity. The entries look like the ramblings of a very distracted monk, shared ink with howl beneath the orchard. Crickets saying, well tonight, felt the clarity in my toes. If caught, you'll just claim it's poetry. Bad poetry, perhaps, but still legal. You're more careful these days, but not afraid. You've come to accept that in this empire, staying awake is a quiet act of rebellion, and even under surveillance, rebellion can still smell delightful. One night, you spot a boy watching your window from across the street, young, barefoot, holding what appears to be a satchel of dried apricots. He doesn't run when you approach. You watching me? You ask softly. He shrugs. Only if you're brewing. You pause, then reach into your sleeve and press a warm fig cake into his hand. Tell them it was soup. You whisper. He nods and disappears into the dark. You return inside, lift your cup, and take a long, slow sip. Because while they may monitor your footsteps, tap your walls, and sniff your linens, they still can't track the quiet thought that stirs behind your eyes with each mouthful. That thought that says, I am still here, and I am still awake. You find yourself staring at the ceiling a lot these days, wondering what it is about coffee that makes an emperor lose sleep. Why coffee, of all things? Why not something obviously rebellious like duels or dramatic poetry? Why not fig wine or tax evasion? Or those enormous peacock feather fans that cause traffic jams in the palace gardens? You sip from your hidden cup and try to make sense of it. It's just a drink, right? Bitter, black, and strong enough to startle the dead. But clearly, to Sultan Murad IV, it's much more. You've read the public edicts well. You've heard them shouted in the streets. Coffee inflames the blood. Coffee distracts the faithful. Coffee encourages idleness, impudence, and impromptu rhyming. You roll your eyes. Coffee might keep people awake, but it doesn't teach them satire. That's just a bonus. Still, the empire's moralists have thoughts. You overhear them muttering in the mosques, and under awnings, coffee stirs the passions. One says, it opens the gateway to innovation. Says another, though not in a complimentary tone. Apparently, the worst thing a man can do in the Ottoman world is start thinking differently before noon. You even spot a leaflet pinned to a tree in the public square. The stimulant of sin. How coffee undermines the humors. It's handwritten and decorated with a very dramatic drawing of a man exploding from the brain. His mustache appears to be screaming. It's not just the clerics, either. Some physicians warn that coffee dries the spleen. Others insist it heats the liver until it becomes arrogant. One man on the street corners claims, with complete conviction, that too much coffee causes spontaneous dancing and irreparable sarcasm. Historians still argue whether Murad was genuinely motivated by religious concern, or simply using theology as a weapon of convenience. After all, Islam's holy texts never mention coffee. It simply didn't exist in the Prophet's time. Some scholars tried to draw comparisons to wine, others to hallucinogenic plants. One bold imam in Aleppo declared, if it makes your eyes go wide, it is the devil's brew. He was later seen drinking thick coffee behind a curtain. You begin collecting these arguments like pressed flowers. You scribble notes in the margins of old cookbooks. You record overheard debates in the folds of your robe. It is a hobby now trying to understand how a cup of dark liquid could shake the foundations of empire. One cleric gives a sermon titled, The Devil in a Demitasse. He shouts, what begins as a sip ends as sedition. Another warns that coffee causes men to challenge their fathers. A third blesses enthusiasm and declares that drinking coffee leads inevitably to dancing, philosophy, and headaches. You sip anyway, but the arguments aren't all wild-eyed and twitchy. Some scholars genuinely worry about the caffeine's influence. They say too many idle men gathered in one place leads to mischief. They know that sermons are less well attended now. The religious schools are quieter. They point out that even the Janissaries, those iron-spined warriors of the empire, are lounging about discussing poetry instead of sharpening their swords. You can't entirely disagree. There is something powerful about a room full of people, all stimulated and slightly sweaty, trading ideas over hot drinks. Coffee houses have become places where authority is mocked, where reforms are whispered, where stories grow legs and start walking across provinces. And that, you realize, might be the heart of it. Murad doesn't fear the bean. He fears the talk. Because you can ban books and bribe scholars. You can rewrite edicts and reshape palaces. But you can't unbrew a conversation once it's started. And coffee, for all its bitterness, brews fast and hot and deep. Still, the official line remains. It's for your health, that and your soul. The empire has decided it wants both to remain asleep. Your barber, now operating as a semi-licensed bean dealer, hands you a bundle of roasted Yemenis beans wrapped in an old prayer scroll. Keep them dry, he warns, and away from the cat. He started licking the grounds. You thank him and walk home quietly, passing through watchmen and a suspiciously well-lit madrasa. You nod, smile, clutch your beans like contraband. When you reach home, you grind them softly with a mortar and pestle line with cotton to muffle the sound. You brew, you sip, and as the warm bitterness hits your tongue, you feel it again, that low, familiar hum beneath your ribs, not rebellion, not disobedience, clarity. And maybe that's what truly bothers the palace. Because a cup of coffee doesn't just wake your body, it wakes your questions. It pokes at your routines. It sharpens the things you thought were dull. And in a city that survives by tradition, by reverence, by silence, that's a dangerous thing. You blow on your cup and stare out the window at a city too quiet for its own good. Somewhere, a muezzin calls the hour. Somewhere, a dervish spins. Somewhere, a sultan scowls at his reflection and wonders why no one's smiling anymore. And here you sit, still sipping, still thinking, still very much awake. You walk slowly past the city square, eyes lowered, feet careful, hands empty, visibly innocent. It's midday, and the market is unusually quiet. A muezzin's call fades into the background as a Janissary patrol trots past on horseback. Their sabers polished, their expressions unreadable. You pause to examine some melons, pretending to care deeply about ripeness. You're not here for melons. You're here because this square, once noisy with backgammon matches and slurping caffeine regulars, is now a cautionary tale, right where the pomegranate cellar stands. There used to be a Café Hazen's old spot, with the low archway and the blue tiles shaped like tulip petals. It's gone now. You saw it happen. It was quick. A decree was announced in the early morning, and by sunset, the place was a pile of scorched cushions and shattered cups. The authorities arrived with torches and scowls. The Sazvi was seized like it held state secrets. No trial, no warning. Just a splash of oil and the crackling sound of empire enforcing its will. The next day, a wooden sign appeared in the wreckage. Here into the sin of steam. You still don't know who put it up. Whispers swirl about more crackdowns. In Kharki, a merchant was publicly caned for excessive brewing. In Edirne, a coffee house owner was reportedly made to drink 10 cups in a row under interrogation, just to watch him sweat and tremble. And in one particularly bizarre punishment, a scholar in Tokit was forced to drink boiled lentils every day for a week as rehabilitation. It would be funny, if not for the pikes. They appear one morning tall, wooden poles outside city gates and main squares, each bearing a blackened, unrecognizable head. You try not to stare. You try not to count. But you can't help it. 14 today. 17 yesterday. Word spreads quickly. At least 5 of them were caught drinking coffee. It's not a joke anymore. You feel it in your bones. The cold certainty of consequence. You used to drink with friends, laugh, recite poems. Now you sip in silence, behind shuttered windows, ears trained for any approaching boots. Even your cat seems nervous, darting under the table whenever you light the coals. Historians still debate whether these executions were truly for coffee violations or simply masked as such, cleansing the empire of larger dissenters under the guise of a beverage ban. Either way, the message was clear. Caffeine equals corruption, and corruption will not be tolerated. You recall Murad's nightly walks through the city, dressed as a commoner, breathing in the air like a man sniffing for blasphemy. There are tales of him entering coffee houses himself, playing the role of a traveler, only to rise mid-cup and declare the space illegal before dragging the owner into the street. Some say he smiled when he did it, others say he wept. You never see him, of course, only his shadow. And yet, despite the terror, the brew survives. You hear of secret meetings on fishing boats, where old men pass around tiny cups under the pretense of selling bait. In the meat district, a butcher runs a front where the pepper grinders double as bean mills. In a candlemaker's workshop, the wax smells suspiciously like roasted coffee and nutmeg. Everywhere you look, the empire is resisting gently, quietly, absurdly. You're part of it now. One evening, you attend a secret tasting beneath a bathhouse. It's darker than usual, lit only by a single oil lamp floating in a shallow bowl of water. The air smells of cloves and coal ash. The host is an elderly woman with a voice like cracked parchment. She serves each guest a sip from a carved wooden ladle and instructs you to think the beans aloud before drinking. You do. It tastes of earth and survival. Someone begins reciting a list of banned things from memory. Tulip parades, shadow plays, certain songs in the Macomb scale, loose-fitting belts that encourage swagger. Coffee is just one name and a long litany of silence joy. Later, as you climb back into the street, you pass a group of boys playing with pebbles. One is pretending to sell something. Hot broth, secret soup, he calls. His friends giggle. You meet his eyes. He grins and holds up a tiny clay cup. He knows. You say nothing, just nod and walk on. At home, you light the coals, slowly, like a ritual. You grind the beans with a stone smoother than your thumbprint. You add the cardamom. You stir 3 times clockwise, once counterclockwise. You whisper the names of your missing friends. You pour the brew into your favorite cup chip, gold line, absurdly delicate, and you drink. It's not rebellion. It's not nostalgia. It's survival. It's comfort. It's the small warmth of something true. And even as heads hang from pikes and spies skulk through alleyways, you remember, the empire may control the law, but it doesn't control the craving. And as long as someone, somewhere, dares to heat the water, grind the bean, and take the first trembling sip, the story isn't over. The street preacher's voice cracks from overuse. You've passed him before outside the new mosque, always near the fountain, standing atop the same crate with a finger pointed skyward and a beard that could frighten wolves. Today, he's yelling louder than usual. Coffee deceives the soul. It mimics piety with alertness. You linger by the pomegranate stall, pretending to inspect bruises. A few others stop, too. Some snort with amusement. One old woman crosses herself and mutters something about slippery morals and sleepless children. It keeps you from proper rest. The preacher barks, veins bulging. Your minds race. Your tongues wag while your prayers rot on the vine. You sip from a hollowed quince hidden in your sleeve and keep walking. It's not just Murad for anymore. It's the clerics now. The empire's spiritual voice has joined the chorus of dissent. And while some imams quietly enjoy their coffee in the privacy of their study, others see it as a creeping danger to indulgent, to worldly, to socially volatile. You understand their fear. Coffee is a mirror. It shows you yourself sharper, faster, more curious than you were an hour ago. And for some, that's terrifying. You duck into the paper seller's stall, where Howell's waiting among ink bottles and scrolls. He grins and pulls out a folded leaflet. Hot off the press, he says, "Just recited in a madrasa this morning." You smooth the paper and read, "Beware the bitter brew that stirs rebellion in the blood. It awakens not the soul, but seduces it. The prophet forbade wine. Coffee is wine by other means." You raise your brows. Wine by other means. Hell shrugs. Better marketing than being juice that makes you chatty. The arguments spill beyond the mosques now. You hear them in bathhouses, markets, and palace kitchens. Is coffee haram? Is it halal? Does it belong in the sacred or the profane? No one agrees. Historians still argue over which schools of Islamic law viewed coffee as legitimate, and which condemned it outright. Some clerics feared the stimulant's effect on late-night worship. Others embraced it as a tool for divine vigilance. You remember the Sufis twirling in circles and sipping spice cob between chants. They'd say God is more easily found when you're awake, but the louder voices now insist God prefers you rested and compliant. One Friday, your neighborhood mosque hosts a debate. It has unusual, inviting both a conservative preacher and a younger scholar who has been rumored to brew coffee in his study. You attend. The elder opens with force. Does the Quran say coffee is holy? No. Does it appear in any hadith? No. Therefore it is a novelty, and novelty is the gate of sin. The younger scholar adjusts his turban calmly. And yet, did not the prophet adapt to the tools of his time? Are not all good things when used in moderation tools of reflection? The crowd murmurs. A few men nod. One yawns audibly. The elder scowls. It leads to idle chatter. The younger man smiles. Then we must educate the idle, not outlaw the cup. You leave before the debate ends. Your thoughts as stirred as a sazvi. On high heat, the empire is having an identity crisis, struggling between piety and progress, order and expression, and all over a drink you can't even see through. The kavhain you now frequent is hidden behind a carpentry shop. You enter through a door disguised as a tool cabinet, then descend the narrow staircase lit by oil lamps inside hollowed gourds. The air is humid with sawdust and cinnamon. Nimit greets you with a wink and a tray of date-filled buns. Today is special, she says, is not coffee. She makes air quotes with her eyebrows. The place is packed, quiet, yes, but thick with energy. One man is carving verses into a soap bar. Another is sketching a political cartoon onto a fig leaf. Hazen is reading an anonymous poem left on the stairwell that begins, "They say the devil brews by night, but so do I, and I sleep just fine." Someone in the back coughs, everyone freezes. Then they laugh, soft, breathless, a short, guilty exhale of solidarity. You sip. The cup is chipped, the contents perfect. For a moment, the room softens. The oil lamp flickers like it's smiling. Later, on your walk home, you pass the preacher again. His crate is empty. His voice is gone. And his place is a boy offering boiled chickpeas and a flask of ginger tea. You catch the unmistakable scent of roast. He grins and whispers, "Don't worry. It's not coffee." You buy a cup, hand him a coin, and toast silently to survival. Because the louder the empire shouts, the more skillfully its people learn to whisper. You're sitting in the courtyard of a bathhouse, steam curling up around your ankles, when the old man beside you leans over and whispers, "They're not afraid of the drink. They're afraid of the room." You blink. You've just taken your first sip from a clay bowl filled with something very much not tea. Your lips are tingling, your heartbeat a gentle drumbeat against your ribs. The bowl is hot in your hands. The bathhouse quiet except for the hiss of coals and the soft murmuring of naked men, wrapped in towels. They, you ask, the palace, the clerics, the ones with pens for swords. His voice is like gravel soaked in honey. The drink is nothing, but the kavhain. He lets the word linger like the steam rising off his shoulders. That's a different matter. You begin to understand. You've always known the kavhain was more than a cafe. It was a home, a haven, a shared living room for a city that never seemed to sit still. But now, it's clear it was also a nerve center. You think back to all the things that happened there. Arguments over poetry, jokes about tax collectors, impromptu musical performances involving soup spoons and combs, quiet observations about soldiers on edge, none of it treasonous, none of it organized, but all of it alive. And that's what the empire fears most, a population that's paying attention. You walk through the city with new eyes now. You see the empty shop fronts, the missing cushions, the sad, untouched piles of sesame rings outside bakeries. You hear the hush in voices, the way conversations turn abruptly when someone passes too close. Historians still debate whether the Ottoman authorities ever truly understood the function of the coffee house. Some describe the ban as a clumsy attempt to stamp out vice. Others see it as a deliberate strategy to dismantle a growing public sphere, a space where identity, opinion, and satire could safely boil over like a well-made brew. Because the coffee house was democratic in a way the palace never was. Inside, janissaries might sit next to tailors, poets next to fishermen, everyone equal under the steam of a shared sazvi, one cup, one voice, one long, meandering conversation that never truly ended. And that made it powerful. You hear of a Kafhane in Damascus that secretly operated for 3 years behind a barber shop. They held weekly debates on whether cats could be reincarnated as viziers. You hear of another in Cairo that passed banned poetry through a system of tea trays and mismatched saucers. In Jerusalem, they say, the coffee house was shaped like a caravanserai, and if someone coughed twice near the rose water bottle, it meant change the subject. You smile. The empire banned coffee because it feared noise. But in doing so, it created a symphony of whispers. Hazen, always the quiet leader, now teaches new recruits how to read faces, how to gauge risk, how to end a conversation mid-sentence and make it sound like a proverb. He calls it the art of boiling without bubbling over. Howell carries a notebook filled with coded observations. Today, the spice seller blinked twice while dusting the anise. One entry reads, possible meaning, price increase or mood swing. Nemeth, ever resourceful, has developed a new line of pastries that look like they contain opium, but are really just extra clove. And you start keeping stories, not just events or facts, but the feeling of things. How the Kafhane made you feel welcome without ceremony. How laughter bloomed without warning. How time softened, stretched, and eventually folded in on itself like dough. You carry those stories the way one carries a cherished letter, secretly, reverently, close to the chest. One evening, you walk by a shuttered coffee house, your first haunt, the one with the blue tulip tiles. The door is chained, the window cracked. Inside, the chairs are stacked like slumbering guards. But on the wall, scratched faintly into the stone, is a message. We remember, we remain, we return. You run your fingers over the letters. They're small, they don't shout, but they endure. You walk home without your usual detours. No clandestine sipping, no coded greetings, just silence, and the occasional creak of your sandals on the cobblestones. The city feels tired, but underneath, it still simmers. And in the quiet of your room, you brew 3 boils, a pinch of cardamom, and a single clove for memory. You lift your cup and whisper, not to anyone, but to the room itself, for the spaces that made us more than quiet. Then you drink. Because the empire may ban places, punish people, even extinguish laughter, but it cannot erase the truth that once, not so long ago, a cup of coffee held a whole world between its steam. Your hands are shaking slightly, not from fear this time, but from trying to sip your coffee through a hollowed-out fig. It's absurdly sticky, questionably effective, and strangely delicious. Across from you, Nemeth is experimenting with a dried gourd. Howell, always dramatic, has fashioned a sipping device from an old flute. You're in disguise, tucked into a warehouse that smells like rotting wool and thyme. There are no proper cups, no real tables, and certainly no signage. But the mood, giddy. You're pioneers now, improvising with the urgency of artists under siege. Welcome to the age of drinking in disguise. Since the decree's grip tightened, the people of the empire have responded not with riots or rebellions but with props. Everyday objects now double as contraband tools of caffeine survival. A soup ladle with a false bottom, a ring box that holds a week's worth of finely ground Yemenis roast. Someone even claims to have crafted a hollow prayer bead filled with cold brew. You haven't seen it, but you want to believe. And then there's the fruit, oranges, melons, even eggplants carved out, dried, and repurposed as absurd little drinking vessels. They're impractical, leaky, and borderline comic, but they serve a purpose, plausible deniability. You remember the first time you drank from a hollowed pomegranate, the seeds still clung to the inside, tinting the coffee with a strange floral sweetness. You laughed. It wasn't just coffee. It was a joke played on tyranny, a delicious, steaming prank. Historians still marvel at the creativity of these disguises. Was it desperation? Genius? A form of protest cloaked in absurdity? It's hard to say. But one thing is certain. People will go to extraordinary lengths to preserve a ritual that matters. Of course, with every invention comes risk. You hear of a merchant caught with a brass inkwell that held coffee concentrate. He claimed it was medicinal ink. The judge, unimpressed, sentenced him to 3 weeks sweeping pigeon coops at the Topkapi Palace. Another man, a baker in Galata, hid his coffee in a loaf of bread. Unfortunately, the loaf collapsed during a random inspection. The coffee leaked out. The story spread faster than yeast in summer. There are rumors of an entire underground guild now, the Steep Society. They exchange brewing tips via embroidered handkerchiefs they made beneath bathhouses. Their symbol is a subtle curl stitched into the corner of their garments, easy to miss. Unless you're looking, you're not sure if the guild is real or just an elaborate running joke. But you start checking handkerchiefs just in case. Even the children get in on it. You pass a group playing in an alley, all wearing masks made from folded fig leaves. They carry tiny satchels and tray pretend cups of suspicious soup. One boy barks, "You there? Show me your ladle." Another gasps, "It's full of darkness," and dramatically faints into a pile of laundry. You can't help laughing, and then you realize they're mimicking the raids, the curfews, the inspections, even in their games. They understand what's happening, what's forbidden, what's worth pretending for. It hits you like a jolt of espresso. This isn't just a temporary inconvenience. This is a cultural moment, a transformation by absurd necessity. A new chapter in Ottoman life written with cinnamon sticks and contraband. Save us. You return home to find a package tucked into your shutter. Inside, a single lemon, carved, hollowed, dried. You smile. Later that night, you host a tea party. In theory, your guests arrive with gift-wrapped bundles, odd-shaped pouches, and expressions of conspiratorial joy. You serve cardamom biscuits shaped like mustaches. Hello gives a toast with a melon shell full of something both bitter and hopeful. You drink carefully, awkwardly, with fruit juice dribbling down your wrist. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. Because even now, even under threat, people still gather, still brew, still laugh. You've made peace with the new rules, not by following them, of course, but by bending around them with the elegance of a cat stealing fish. And the empire? It hasn't caught on yet. Or maybe it has, and it just can't keep up with the ingenuity of a people who refuse to give up the comfort of a cup shared among friends. So, you raise your fig to the ceiling beams. You sip. It tastes like freedom, messy, sweet, and a little pulpy, and is enough to keep going. Tonight, you're balancing a saucer on your knee while bribing a palace guard with 3 honey-soaked walnuts. You never imagined it would come to this, negotiating access to coffee like you're buying states, say. Crets, but here you are, and your walnut game is strong. The guard, a soft-spoken man with tired eyes and a weakness for sweets, takes a long look at the walnuts, sniffs one suspiciously, then slides the wooden slat aside. 15 minutes, he murmurs. No loud slurping. You nod, step inside the courtyard, and immediately catch the scent of something miraculous. It's real coffee, not broth, not burnt figs, not cardamom and imagination. Actual coffee, dark, rich, singing through the air like the opening note of a long-lost song. This is the black market, not in spices or silk, but in steaming contraband comfort. It turns out that bribery, like caffeine, is a fundamental force in the Ottoman universe. You've learned the rules by now. A bundle of raisins for a minor official, a pair of embroidered slippers for a customs inspector, and for one famously grumpy tax clerk, a bowl of candied eggplant. Each gift buys silence, or time, or access to the next secret brewing spot. This economy isn't about coins. It's about sugar, favors, and gentle corruption, and it thrives. You meet others who've mastered the system. A pastry vendor whose trays conceal both pistachio rolls and roasted beans. A barber who mixes scalp tonic with espresso concentrate. A candle maker who sells tall tapers hollowed out just enough to store a single demi-tasse, and a tiny pinch of ground cinnamon. Howell now deals exclusively in favors. His rate, 1 poem per cup, rhyming optional. Alliteration preferred, O being divine. Thou art my spark, brewed in silence, sipped in dark. Nemeth, ever resourceful, invents a new pastry called bakov, a square of sweet dough stuffed with dry grounds and chopped almonds. It's technically edible, she says, but chew carefully. You chew, you cry a little. It's beautiful. Historians still puzzle over the Ottoman coffee ban's long-term effects. Was it a failed purge, a temporary tightening of imperial control, or, as some argue, a social pressure cooker that inadvertently brewed an entire counterculture one sticky walnut at a time? Because here's the truth. The ban didn't stop people from drinking coffee. It just changed how they shared it. Every transaction became a whispered trust exercise. Every cup brewed was a small risk. A tiny rebellion poured with careful hands and covered quickly with a saucer when someone knocked. At the door, there were mishaps, of course. A man in Edirne accidentally paid a bribe with pickled grapes. The official, furious, blew the whistle. The man was fined, then required to distribute pamphlets warning others not to confuse bribes with snacks. Another incident in the palace kitchens involved a miscommunication between two eunuchs. One whispered sweet beans, the other misheard steeped hens. A stew was made, lives were ruined. You learn that some guards have developed a taste for the game. They walk their patrols slowly, giving friendly nods to windows where warm light glows late into the night. They accept fig cakes without comment. One even compliments your brewing technique, albeit in the coded phrase, "Your kitchen smells thoughtful tonight." You thank him, offer a candied almond. He leaves without knocking. It becomes an odd rhythm. This life of loopholes. You carry bundles of mint tied with secret pouches of roast. You hide your sazvi inside a tambourine. You memorize the schedules of the guards who are lenient versus the ones who pretend not to notice, and the ones who absolutely do. And through it all, the coffee keeps flowing. Not freely, not openly, but earnestly. Because the empire can outlaw brewing. It can outlaw buying, selling, and even slurping. But it cannot outlaw the moment, the soft exhale, the warm cup, the quiet joy of a shared vice between two people pretending they're just chatting about rain. So you pay your bribes, you pass your cups, you share your almonds and your fig cakes and your increasingly mediocre poetry. You keep the ritual alive, one drink at a time. You're crouched in a cramped attic behind the bolt of moth-eaten velvet, surrounded by 10 very serious people and one confused cat. There's a candle in the corner, a jug of water balanced precariously on a beam, and a freshly brewed pot of contraband coffee resting like royalty on a brass tray. Tonight's topic isn't smuggling methods, or bean roasting hacks, or bribe inflation. Tonight, it's tulips. Did you hear they've been banned? Someone asks, sipping from a teacup labeled chicken stock. Nemeth nods grimly. Second time this decade, the palace thinks they're corrupting our morals. You blink. Tulips. To flamboyant, says Howell. To French. You've heard this before. Of course. The empire doesn't just outlaw beverages. It bans all kinds of things that might, in the eyes of the palace, make the people to relaxed, to joyful, or to unpredictable, and tulips. They're the floral equivalent of just hands. You remember the height of tulip mania, sultans throwing garden parties with whole fountains of rosewater, dancers with floral headdresses, and poetry contests judged by how many flower metaphors you could cram into a stanza. Those days feel like a dream now. Today, tulips are subversive, coffee is contraband, and, as you learn later that night, there was once a brief but very real ban on tight trousers. Apparently, Sultan Murad IV declared that overly fitted garments were un-Islamic, disruptive to the natural drape of masculine dignity, and, in one deeply weird edict, provocative to horses. Historians still debate whether the final line was metaphor or mistranslation. But the list doesn't stop there. You hear of a ban on public whistling, on tambourines played after sundown, on fortune-telling, on foreign novels, unless they involved extremely boring monks. One clerk tells you he was reprimanded for naming his cat after a vizier. Another says he once got fined for over-enthusiastic shadow puppetry, and of course, tobacco. The empire's relationship with smoking is almost as erratic as with coffee. Sometimes it's banned, sometimes tolerated. At one point, Murad IV allegedly caught a man smoking in a rowboat on the Bosphorus and had the entire boat sunk. You ask, was there anyone on the boat with him? The clerk shrugs. Probably. But now they're smoke-free. You sit back and realize something profound. It's not about the thing. It's about the pattern. The empire bans whatever makes people comfortable outside the structures of controlled pleasures that are unregulated, shared freely, improvised in the shadows. Tulips, tobacco, tight pants, tambourines, and coffee. Each ban becomes a kind of test. Will the people conform, or will they adapt? You already know the answer. You've seen it in the underground cafes disguised as carpet storage rooms, in the coffee poured into clay bowls shaped like fruit, in the coded poetry passed from street musicians to janissaries. You've even seen it in yourself. Your wardrobe now includes the decoy robes for raids. You've memorized at least 5 variations of the phrase, "No, officer, that's just lentil water." You've learned to nod without blinking when a guard casually asks, "Do you smell cinnamon?" And now, here in this attic, among banned flowers and barely legal beverages, you watch as Nimet unfolds a cloth napkin embroidered with a bright red tulip. Gasps, laughter, a single tear. "It's just thread," she says. "But it's bold thread." You raise your makeshift cup to bold thread. You say, "To everything they ban," Howell adds, "to everything we'll unban ourselves." Someone whispers from the shadows. You all drink, slowly, stealthily, as if to savor not just the flavor, but the fact that you still can. Because in an empire obsessed with suppression, even a tulip can feel like a revolution. Word count, 1,361, awaiting continue. The Venetian traders have arrived. You spot them in the harbor early one morning. Their long ships docked with the elegance of dancers, sails billowing like gossip in the wind. They strut down the gangplanks with embroidered waistcoats and the vaguely smug air of men who believe themselves to be history's protagonists, and they want coffee. Not just the beans any fool with a purse and a mule can get those. No, the Venetians want the experience, the cups, the ritual, the whisper of rebellion and cardamom that lingers in every proper Ottoman brew. You watch from the shadows of a fish stall as they sample a tiny demi-tasse brewed by a smiling merchant with exactly zero fear of imperial punishment. One Venetian tilts his head, smacks his lips, and says something enthusiastic in Italian. You don't speak it, but you assume it translates to, "How do I take this back to Europe and charge triple for it?" Word spreads fast. The foreigners are enchanted. They've never tasted anything like it. They ask for lessons, for beans, for copper saves, and the tiny spoons shaped like tulip stems. One even tries to buy Howell's mustache, believing it a necessary accessory for the full Ottoman coffee drinking experience. Howell considers it only if you throw into barrels of silk and your finest loot. Trade begins to bloom. You hear Stories of coffee arriving in Venice under names like black syrup and oriental ink. European nobles, unaware of its banned status, sip openly and write letters to their cousins about the exotic brew that makes one write poems and stay awake through meetings. Historians still debate how much of this was business and how much was cultural envy. The Ottomans had mastered something subtle in an entire sensory world built around warmth, conversation, and the gentle defiance of routine the Europeans wanted in. And while the empire tried to stamp it out at home, it was accidentally exporting coffee's mystique abroad. You imagine Murad IV pacing the halls of Top Copy, unaware that his ban is making the drink more desirable elsewhere. In Venice, it becomes trendy. In Paris, philosophical. In London, eventually, it will become an excuse to avoid ale before noon. One Venetian trader tells Hazen, "Your empire forbids it. That means it must be good." Hazen, ever the merchant, nods sagely and quadruples the price. Of course, the coffee that goes west isn't quite the same. The Venetians boil it too long. The Parisians add too much milk. The Dutch try to cold steep it and call it innovation. But still, something of the original lingers. A dark, rich essence, a sense of ceremony, a flavor of risk. You learn that entire ships are now sailing north with sacks of beans, hidden beneath false bottoms of olive oil casks. The guards at customs feign ignorance. As long as a few coins change hands, you hear of a German prince who insists his Turkish servants prepare coffee the Ottoman way, never realizing the recipe is completely made up to confuse him. One afternoon, you pass a group of Englishmen near the bazaar, loudly debating whether coffee causes hair growth. One says yes, he's had to shave twice a day since drinking it. Another claims it improves fencing. A third insists it's a plot by the French to make everyone jittery. You walk away, grinning. The empire's ban, so strict, so solemn, has now become a worldwide curiosity. And back home, the underground coffee scene is thriving. Hello opens a cultural exchange salon behind the hammam. He invites foreigners to sample Ottoman-style coffee while pretending it's a language lesson. "We call this verb tense fluidity," he says. Pouring the brew, Nimitz sells embroidered napkins with subtle coffee stains in the shape of famous mosques. Collectors adore them. She tells each one, "This mark, brewed during a thunderstorm, very rare." You begin writing letters to distant cousins, smuggling tiny samples inside wax-sealed scrolls. Each packet contains a pinch of roast and a quote from Rumi. "Try to stay awake, the dawn will come." And slowly, gently, you realize something profound. The empire may still ban it, but coffee has already escaped. It now flows through Venetian ports, Parisian salons, London counting houses. It travels on silk routes and diplomatic parcels, in the pockets of spice merchants and the hearts of exiles. The more the Ottomans resist it, the further it spreads. And somewhere, in a small cafe in Venice, a bearded man leans over his cup and murmurs, "This is rebellion, and it tastes like cardamom." You take a long sip from your chipped, smuggled cup and smile, because your story, once hidden in corners and cloaked in fruit skins, is now out in the world, and it's brewing faster than ever. The ban doesn't lift, not formally, not with fanfare or apologies, but it loosens. One day, you walk past the fishmonger's stall and smell coffee openly brewed, no curtains drawn, no lookouts posted, just a steaming seize-vide balanced on a corner of the brazier like it had always been allowed. You pause, half convinced it's bait for a sting. But then the fishmonger looks up, shrugs, and says, "He's too busy these days." He doesn't say who, but you know. Sultan Murad IV has grown distracted. His campaigns in Iraq have intensified. His enemies are multiplying faster than his heirs. There are whispers of illness, of nights spent pacing the palace alone. The janissaries are restless, the court is bloated, and even the secret police seem tired. In the wake of all this, the coffee ban begins to uncoil like a snake deciding it is not worth the energy to strike. You test the waters cautiously. You pour a cup on your own stoop one morning, nothing fancy. Just a little roast with a splash of rose water, and sip it in full view of the street. No knock at the door. No distant boots. Just a dog yawning and a neighbor waving from her laundry line. Later that day, a local imam mentions he started brewing again for late-night study. Not for indulgence, he insists, but for theological clarity. You nod respectfully while offering him a second cup. Historians still debate whether Murad's loosening of enforcement was a deliberate policy shift, or just the natural result of imperial exhaustion. There are no official decrees declaring coffee legal again. No scribe comes running through the street with a golden scroll announcing your right to boil beans in peace. But slowly, inevitably, the pressure releases. The saviors come out of hiding. The coffee houses don't exactly reopen, but their ghosts reappear, quiet gatherings in carpet shops. Tea stalls that just happen to carry extra bitter tea. Candles are lit, cushions unrolled. The conversations resume. You return to one such space, Hazen's latest hideout. Disguised as a calligraphy studio, you push open the door and find it humming again with quiet chatter and steam. The room smells of ink and cinnamon. On the wall, someone has scribbled. There are no legal cups, only brave ones. You sip and smile. Nimit's back too, with a tray of Bakov pastries shaped like miniature sultans. I call this one the silent abdicator. It's filled with ground walnuts and gentle defiance. Hello, ever poetic, now recites aloud. The band was a dream, but the coffee stayed awake. You hear others testing the boundaries. A kavhain near the bathhouse now posts a sign that reads, "Herbal consultations available. Includes bitter liquids." One merchant store is selling philosopher's stew in tiny cups with saucers. Another offers liquid meditation and winks so aggressively you're concerned for his eye health. The fear isn't gone, not entirely, but it's softer now, like a shadow that flinches when you look directly at it. Even the guards seem more relaxed. One accepts a fig stuffed pastry without comment. Another, notoriously stern, is caught humming a love poem while cradling a warm cup during his midnight rounds. You suspect they've all been sipping behind closed doors for years. And so, the band begins to erode, not with resistance or legislation, but with quiet fatigue. The empire, for all its pomp, is still made of people, and people need comfort. They need conversation. They need a moment in the day when things make sense, when the world narrows to steam rising from a tiny chip cup. You take long walks now, Saisby tucked casually into your satchel. You brew in alleyways, on rooftops, even once inside a gondola tied up at the edge of the Golden Horn. Each sip is both a memory and a promise that this too shall pass. One afternoon, you sit beneath a fig tree with a handful of friends, some old, some newly brave, and pass around a pot of the darkest roast you've tasted in months. You speak softly, you laugh freely, you leave the saucers in plain sight, and when a palace official walks past, you all freeze. He pauses, sniffs, looks down at your cup, and then he says, "You've added too much cardamom." He walks away, and you exhale, because you know it's not quite freedom yet, but it's the closest thing you've tasted in a long, long time. You're underground again, but this time, it feels different. You're not crouching. You're not whispering. You're not passing coded notes folded into pastry boxes. Tonight, in the candlelit cellar, beneath the dye shop, you lay watching a group of musicians tune their instruments next to an open brazier and a table stacked with steaming cups. No one's wearing a disguise. No one's peering anxiously at the staircase. And most telling of all, no one's pretending this isn't a coffee house. It's not officially one. Of course, on paper, this place still sells textiles and offers colorful spiritual advice. But anyone who's here knows the truth: coffee is back, and it's deliciously illegal in name only. You take a seat on a cushion that used to smell like mold and now smells like roasted Yemenis beans and slightly overexcited cinnamon. The room is warmer than usual, not just from the coals but from something looser, freer, like a city learning how to breathe again. You sipped out strong, no sugar, just the way you like it. and you listen. The conversation flows around you low, layered, electric. Not the paranoid hush of the early banners, but something more confident, smug, even. You hear gossip, poetry, political jokes. Someone describes the Grand Vizier's most recent robe as a tragic curtain with buttons. The laughter is quick. No one shushes it. Howell leans over and whispers, "It's different now, isn't it?" You nod. Feels awake. Historians still puzzle over this twilight of the coffee ban. When enforcement grew spotty and resistance turned ritual into quiet rebellion. Some describe it as the birth of Ottoman civil society. Others call it an accident of imperial fatigue. But those of you who lived it, you just call it returning. Not just to coffee, but to community. You remember what it was like when things were quiet, when every step to a Saisvi was a risk. Now, even if the law hasn't changed, the spirit has. You still keep one eye on the door, but not both. Even the Kavhain has changed shape. This one, for example, is part music hall, part library, part conspiracy of cushions and oversweetened dates. In the corner, a man sketches caricatures of passing pashas with exaggerated noses and sleepy eyes. He is only half joking. Someone places a tulip in his inkwell. You know that across the city, more spaces like this are reawakening. You've heard of one in Skdar that doubles as a philosophical debate club. Another in Fatih holds midnight story sessions where the entry fee is a haiku and a clove. The secrecy hasn't vanished, it's just become charming. Savas are no longer hidden. They're engraved and passed down. Recipes are no longer memorized in panic, but published in underground pamphlets. There's a guidebook now, circulating in whispers, called The Gentle Art of Brewing and Tyrannical. Toms, you helped edit a page. And then, the moment that seals it, the poet arrives. A man with silver at his temples and holes in his shoes. He clears his throat, sets down a plain cup, and recites softly. When the empire closed its ears, we brewed our words in steam. We whispered truths in coffee grounds and learned again to dream. A beat of silence follows. Then the soft percussion of palms on knees, the rhythm of approval. You look around and realize the underground isn't hiding anymore. It's celebrating. The city has grown around the ban, reshaped by it, but no longer afraid of it. Even the guards who pass by these days tend to pause, sniff the air, and walk a little more slowly. You once saw one accept a cup with both hands and a wink. You think about Sultan Murad IV still in power, still fears, still feared. But you also wonder if, somewhere in the palace, he hears the echoes. If he notices the laughter drifting through alleyways. If he smells the coffee on his own advisor's breath and simply sighs. The empire is tired, and the people are waking up again. You sip from your cup, now cool, now almost gone, and let the warmth linger in your chest. The musicians begin to play. You lean back, close your eyes, and for a moment, let yourself believe that the worst is over. Because even in the cellar, even underground, the Kavhain is alive again. And you're not hiding anymore. Someone has left a folded piece of parchment on your doorstep. No wax seal, no address, just a faint dusting of coffee grounds across the top like a secret handshake in powdered form. You open it slowly. It's a poem. O bitter bean, whose depths I crave, though sultans scowl and scholars rave. You warm my thoughts, you stir my pen, and make me question powerful men. You chuckle, the line is clumsy, the rhyme's a little strained. But that last verse, it hits hard. Because whether anyone intended it or not, coffee has become the quiet fuel of defiance, and poetry is how it travels. In the months since the crackdown began to fade, the poets have reemerged. Not on grand stages or court scrolls, no. They operate in margins, in whispers, in poems smuggled inside loaves of bread or scratched into the bottom of serving trays. And you've become something of a collector. You find a couplet etched into the base of your favorite cup. This vessel held no wine, but still inspired thoughts that shook the quill. You laugh into your drink. Whoever wrote that clearly had experience dodging moral censors and managing clumsy metaphors. Poetry, it seems, is the final frontier of the coffee underground. Some of it satirical, jabbing at officials, mocking the ban, turning imperial decrees into comedic verse. One popular chorus that keeps turning up in baklava boxes goes, ban my brew and burn my spoon. I'll sip it hot beneath the moon. Others write tributes to the drink itself, your steam. A cloud upon my brow, my soul lifts higher with each vow. I'd marry beans if I knew how. Historians still argue whether this burst of caffeine-fueled verse marks the birth of a new Ottoman literary style. Some call it Kafkain realism. Others refer to it less kindly as the jittery genre. But one thing's certain, never before has poetry been so entwined with smuggling. You find poems wrapped around "Save Us," woven into tapestries, embroidered into collars. Hell even gifts you a handkerchief with the phrase, "They outlawed my drink, not my ink." He bows dramatically, nearly spills his cup, and recites 5 more stanzas about how coffee once made him fall in love with a bootmaker named Yelda. Whether or not she existed is unclear. The poem, however, slaps. Nimit begins hosting verse nights in her pastry shop after hours. The rule is simple. If you want a cup, you must recite a poem original or borrowed. Bonus points for puns. One Janissary stands and delivers, "Our Sultan's wrath may spill the brew, but sugar hides in pockets too." A ripple of laughter, applause. The sound of spoons tapping saucers like applause. In miniature, what began as rebellion has softened into ritual. You sit through these nights in awe, not because the poetry is perfect, it's not, or even because the risk is gone, it's not, but because the spirit is still there. The refusal to be silenced. The gentle absurdity of sipping coffee while quoting something barely legal and slightly slanted. And every time a poem really lands, you feel it in your bones. That deep, slow, satisfied warmth. Like the heat from a second cup. Like the moment you know you're not alone. You start writing, too. Not to publish, just to remember. Snippets scratched on napkins, lines etched into the inside of your sleeve, metaphors involving coals, moons, and spoons. Some are silly. This brew, so bold, defies my knees. I drank the fast, now I must sneeze. Some feel more serious. I fear the dark, so I lit a flame. It brewed a thought, they called it blame. And in a city where the laws may shift, but the people remain steady, poetry becomes your second language. You see it everywhere now, in graffiti, on lampposts, whispered into fig leaves and handed off like coded messages. There's even a running poem on the bathroom walls of the public hammam that updates daily. Today's entry reads, "I sip with pride, though others frown, the empire sleeps. I won't lie down. You don't know who wrote it, but you leave your own verse beneath it, carved with a thumbtack. Let sultans stew, and viziers weep. We write, we drink, we do not sleep. And then you leave, slowly, smiling. Because in this empire, poetry has become your passport, your resistance, your lullaby, and your cup, still full. You pass the old Kafkain one morning, the first one you ever visited, back before the ban, when the floor still creaked under arguments about poetry, and Hazen looked 5 years younger. The place has been shuttered for ages, its windows coated with the fine dust of imperial disapproval. But today, the front door is open. No trumpet fanfare, no guards waving scrolls, just a quiet breeze pushing through the curtain and a single cup on the windowsill, steaming slightly, as if waiting for someone to notice. You step inside. The room is smaller than you remember, but familiar. The cushions are back. The tiles have been scrubbed. There's a new Saisvi hanging above the hearth, polished and proud. And Hazen is behind the counter again, humming something that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby about stubborn herbs. You don't say anything. You just sit. You nod. He nods back. And moments later, the coffee arrives. No disguise, no false label, no fruit shell masquerade. Just a proper cup, porcelain, gold rim. The real thing. It's not just this place. All across the city, doors are opening, quietly, carefully, like flowers testing the wind. The coffee houses, once ghosted into cellars and candlelit storage rooms, are returning, stepping out into the daylight like survivors blinking at the sun. They're not boasting, no signs shout we're back, no parades, just presence. Historians still argue when exactly the ban ended. Officially, it never really did. Murad IV never signed a repeal. No grand pronouncement erased the edict. Instead, the law simply faded. Like steam off a cold cup, the empire got tired, the people got bold, and the sultan, he got distracted. And in that quiet, between enforcement and exhaustion, the Kavhain returned. You visit a new one near the harbor, where the tables are barrels, and the owner insists all poetry must rhyme with bean. Another opens in a converted stables, with murals of horses drinking espresso and looking thoughtfully into the distance. Some play music again, soft, melancholic, mostly lutes and low drums. Others stay hushed, devoted to books and chess and serious arguments about whether fortune-telling from coffee grounds can predict marriage or just indigestion. You meet old friends again. Howell sits beside the same window, now composing epics about spoons. Nimet has created a pastry shaped like a sultan's turban, filled with cardamom cream. Selim, who vanished months ago, returns, limping slightly, but smiling. He never explains where he went. You never ask. The city breathes easier. There are still risks, of course. A few officials grumble. Some Kavhain still operate on edge. But the fear has loosened its grip, and the ritual flows again. You sip and remember the way it used to be before disguises, before fake shell cups and hollow prayer beads. You miss this, the noise, the stories, the comfort. One day, a young man stands at the front of the room and reads aloud. We never rioted, we never fought, we only brewed, and we were caught. But now we sip, and no one flees. We won with sugar, steam, and knees. Applause follows, light, rhythmic, relaxed. You tap your spoon twice against your saucer of toast, and you notice something you hadn't before. The Kavhain is full of new faces. You see young people, those who weren't there during the darkest days of the ban, sipping freely, laughing at jokes they didn't have to learn in code. For them, the underground era is already myth. Their coffee comes without fear. Their laughter is louder, and their cups clean. You smile. You don't feel bitter about it. You feel proud, because somehow, despite everything, despite the raids and the pikes and the hollowed out oranges, you kept the flame alive. You passed the sazvi from one hand to another. You brewed when brewing meant danger. You whispered when speaking meant risk. And now, you sit in a room filled with steam and stories and sugar cubes balanced on the edge of porcelain cups, and you sip. You sip slowly, because the return of the coffee house isn't loud or revolutionary. It's not a grand triumph written in gold. It's just the sound of quiet conversation, the weight of a warm cup, and the taste of something forbidden made familiar again. And in that moment, you know, you've come home. There's an ambassador in your seat. He's French or Dutch, or possibly Polish. It's hard to tell with all the embroidery. He sips carefully from a porcelain cup held between gloved fingers, as if the drink might evaporate or bite him. Across the table, Hazen watches, barely disguising his amusement. You've been displaced, but you don't mind, because watching this elaborately dressed diplomat try to understand Turkish coffee is its own kind of entertainment. Strong, the ambassador mutters, blinking furiously, rather than tense. Hazen nods. It listens before it speaks. The ambassador doesn't get it, but he nods anyway. He writes something in a leather-bound journal titled Observations of the Sublime Port and its Beverages of Influence. You find a seat nearby, cup in hand, and lean back to listen. This is the new phase, caffeine diplomacy. Foreign envoys now stream through the capital, curious about this drink that once terrified an empire and now seems to define it. They sit in restored Kavhains, admire the cups, ask about the spices, and inevitably whisper, but why was it ever banned? You could write a book in response. Several, actually. Instead, you just sit and let Hazen do the talking. He explains the three-boil rule, the cultural lore, The way the coffee grounds settle like a map of the soul. The ambassador nods along, making exaggerated faces of comprehension. At one point, he asks if adding lemon will make it brighter. Hazen laughs for a full minute. You learn that these diplomats are bringing the ritual home in Venice. There's already a small cafe calling itself La Mezzaluna Nera in Vienna. A retired Ottoman courier has opened a bean house, where the furniture includes imported cushions and the drinks are almost but not quite correct. Paris has taken a different route, serving coffee in highball glasses with powdered wigs and claiming it was their idea all along. Historians still debate whether this diffusion of coffee was deliberate Ottoman soft power or merely the byproduct of a trade network that refused to sleep. Either way, the drink now travels faster than armies and farther than edicts. You watch a Dutch envoy attempt to balance a sugar cube on his spoon while reciting Persian verse. It's a choice, but his heart's in it. He offers you a packet of beans as a gift. The packaging is ornate silver foil with a wax seal and the words from the court of Rotterdam to the sublime drinkers of Istanbul. You smile and give him a proper Turkish sazvi in return. Use this, you say. Boil it 3 times. Watch the foam. Then sip like you mean it. He nods, solemn. And the grounds? Don't drink them unless you want to see your ancestors. The next day, you hear of a British attaché trying to recreate Ottoman coffee in a samovar. The result reportedly causes temporary blindness in one eye and permanent admiration from the Russian consulate. You can't help but feel proud, not just of the drink, but of what it's become. What began as a banned ritual, whispered between trembling hands, has now become a national ambassador and icon, a symbol, a bridge. Where once the sazvi was hidden behind false panels, now it's a centerpiece at diplomatic dinners. Even Murad IV, they say, has softened. He no longer rages at rumors of brewing. Some claim he even accepts it during late-night strategy sessions, though only when poured by his physician and labeled digestive tonic. You wonder how many of his generals are sipping with both hands while muttering clarity under their breath. Back at the Kavhain, the ambassador finishes his 3rd cup, eyebrows raised, heartbeat surely galloping. He leans back and says, I now understand your empire more clearly. Hazen pours him another. Not yet, you don't, and you sip, quietly, on the edges of the conversation, letting the scene soak. And because your coffee once hunted, hidden, hurried is now the centerpiece of cross-cultural curiosity. What was once your quiet rebellion is now a kind of diplomacy. The sazvi has become a peace offering, the bean, a bridge, and somewhere across oceans, someone is boiling water for the first time, holding a foreign cup, and wondering why it smells like both danger and home. You're back where it all began on your rooftop, just before dawn, holding a warm cup between your palms and watching the city come alive one echo at a time. A distant rooster, the slap of a fisherman's net, somewhere far below. A cartwheel squeaks and a sleepy cellar begins, shouting about cucumbers, and through it all, the scent of coffee. It drifts up from alleyways, from windowsills, from newly reopened Kavhains tucked between grocers and tailors. It's in the air now, not hidden, not forbidden, just present, expected. Like the morning call to prayer or the click of slippers on marble, you sip. Your coffee tonight is simple, no elaborate disguise, no saffron or pomegranate cups. Just a strong, dark brew with the barest trace of rose water. You like it that way. After everything, after the bands and the disguises, the fruit shells, the bribes, the cellars, it's nice to just drink something that tastes like itself, and as the city exhales. And today, you remember the raids, the bands, the poetry and paranoia, the spoon-encoded messages, the sleepless nights, the fig-scented solidarity. It's all still with you, etched into your fingers like the memory of holding hot porcelain in secret. But this morning is quiet, and the coffee is legal, almost illegal. You joke to yourself. You visit a friend's home where the coffee tray arrives on a cart with tiny wheels. There is 6 types of sugar, a sprig of mint, a painted saucer shaped like a lion. He serves it with the flair of a theater actor and asks, "Would you like the Sultan's blend or the scholar's roast?" You ask for the scholar's. It's spicy and slightly judgmental. Later, you walk through the Grand Bazaar and see an entire stall devoted to coffee accoutrements, gold plat, tête hand-painted cups, bean-shaped cushions, satirical cartoons carved into sugar cubes. One depicts Murad IV angrily poking his Sazvi with a feather. You're not sure if it's respectful or not, but you buy it anyway. And everywhere you go, people are sipping. On benches, in shops, in carriages. One man drinks from a porcelain flask while steering a donkey. Another pours a second cup for a cat, who sniffs it once and walks away offended. You smile. Historians will try to summarize it all: how a banned drink shaped a city, how its people adapted, resisted, persisted. They'll write about the policy shifts, the clerical debates, the underground networks, the way coffee moved through hands and lips like a sacred flame. But they'll miss the tiny moments. The boy playing janissary outside the old bakery with a wooden Sazvi for a helmet. The woman who still keeps her coffee in a hollowed-out gourd, out of habit. The widower who recites poetry into his morning brew because it reminds him of his wife's voice. You return to your favorite cave, painfully reopened now, polished, repainted, filled with the smell of toasted spices and stubborn joy. Hazen is there, beard a little grayer, smile unchanged. Nimet has brought new pastries, crescent-shaped rolls filled with chocolate and sarcasm. Howell is hosting a bureaucracy and beans poetry night, featuring dramatic readings of tax code footnotes. You take your seat, as always, by the window, and in your cup, you see the layers. Not just foam and grounds, but the history itself steamed into memory. The bands didn't break you. They brewed you stronger. Now, each cup holds not only taste, but legacy. You sip, and somewhere, a few streets away, a child asks his mother, "Why do people always smile after the first sip?" She doesn't answer. She just passes him a warm, miniature cup. He drinks and understands. You return to the old courtyard one final time, not because anything demands it, but because some places ask to be visited again. The fig tree still stretches across the cracked tiles, its leaves fuller now, casting quiet shadows across the benches. Someone has strung up little glass lanterns between the branches. They swing gently in the breeze, catching the early dusk light. You sit on the stone bench, your back to the wall, a cup in your hand, and breathe in the familiar smell: smoke, dust, cinnamon, and that unmistakable note of roasted bean that once meant rebellion and now simply means home. It's not a dramatic place, not a famous one. No sign marks its importance. No crowd gathers here to take photographs or quote poetry. But you remember when this courtyard was a passageway, when it had a door that led to a cellar, that led to a room where you whispered while you sipped. And now there's a little cafe kiosk tucked into the far wall. A boy no older than 15 is manning it. He smiles at you with the same soft amusement Hazen used to wear and asks, "How strong?" You say, "Strong enough to remember." He nods like he understands, even if he doesn't yet, and you sip. There's a new generation here now. Kids who never had to drink from fruit cups, who never bribed a guard with walnuts or recited poetry in underground rooms, who don't jump at every knock or hide their save us behind false panels. Their world is easier, louder, freer. And yet, they brew with reverence. You see them measuring water carefully, waiting for the foam, passing the cups with two hands, quoting verses that were once whispered, respecting the ritual, even if they never live its danger. Historians still argue over what changed the empire. Some say it was the wars. Others, the bureaucratic reforms. A few mention the trade routes, the influx of Western ideas, the shifting nature of divine authority. But you know the truth. The empire changed because people gathered in corners and shared cups of coffee. Because they laughed when they were told not to. Because they whispered poems instead of shouting. Because when faced with silence, they brewed something louder. It was never about the drink. It was always about the pause, the space, the moment when you could look someone in the eye across a tiny cup and say without saying, "I see you." You sip again. The coffee is a little too hot. You smile. From the street, you hear the sound of a lute, the tap of sandals, the low murmur of a man explaining something mundane with great excitement. You hear life unfiltered, unsupervised, steeped in comfort, and you let yourself rest. Because the band is history now. But what survived isn't just the beverages, the culture it carried, the late-night debates, the disguised poems, the refusal to let comfort die. You glance at the boy behind the kiosk and wonder what his story will be. What his cup will come to mean. You imagine him, years from now, telling someone, "There was a time when people weren't allowed to drink this. Can you believe it?" They'll laugh, and he'll pause, sip, and say, "But they did anyway." You finish your cup slowly, savoring the dregs, the weight, the warmth. Then you rise, stretch, and leave the empty cup on the bench. A quiet offering to all the sips that came before. Word count 1,375, wind down 300 words, and now, as the coals fade and the last trace of coffee steam curls gently into the night, you let your shoulders relax. Let the sounds grow softer, the edges of memory blur just enough to soothe. Imagine the hush of a quiet street, cobblestones cooled by moonlight. Picture the faint rustle of linen curtains swaying in an open window, a distant cup being set down, a sigh, a chuckle. Your breath slows, deepens, as if matching the pace of a sleepy city that's finally found its rhythm again. The stories are still there, tucked between cushions, painted in the cracks of old walls, simmering gently in the hearts of those who sip. You don't need to chase them now. Just sit with them. Let them settle like coffee grounds at the bottom of your favorite cup. The streets are quiet. The cards are at ease. The poets are asleep or dreaming of new rhymes. The fig tree leans a little, as if whispering good night. And you, dear listener, you made it. Through the band, the brew, the disguises and disguises within disguises. Through the sweet defiance of centuries boiled down into one long, steady sip. So close your eyes now. Let the warmth linger. Let the sounds grow distant. You are safe. You are full. You are home.